Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists 5 days a week. My name is Eva, and my guest today is Nathan Fowkes. And in this episode, you will learn what it takes to become a great artist.
This is probably the best time in history to be an artist. Every city in the world has small animation and video game studios cropping up and getting into that game, and good for them, because there's these amazing games and animated projects that are coming from all over the world.
With many years in entertainment industry, he is a veteran artist with screen credits on 11 featured films, including The Prince of Egypt, Spirit, several projects within the Shrek Universe, How to Train Your Dragon, Legend of Puss in the Boots, Rio 2, and recently Ferdinand. You can look forward to some of the Nathan's upcoming projects, which are animated feature films from Disney and Paramount Animation. Nathan is well known as a teacher of color and light and design, and he is regular guest lecturer at Art Center College of Design, and he has taught at the Los Angeles Academy of Figurative Art and the Laguna College of Art and Design too. He is currently teaching online classes at schoolism.com. Additionally, Nathan has been sought after as a consultant for game studios to enhance the quality of their theatrical presentation. He has worked with numerous clients including Blizzard Entertainment, Disney Interactive, Riot Games, Ubisoft, King, Superparcel, and Rovio. So please welcome Nathan Fowkes and let's get to the interview. So welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Nathan here. Hi!
It is good to be here.
I'm super happy that you joined us and took time from your busy schedule. And let's just start right away with your background. And I would like to ask you about your childhood as well, and if you remember how your childhood smelled like.
What it smelled like?
Yeah, it's like a fun question.
That's actually, yeah, it's funny how those, it's funny, you walk through life and all of a sudden you smell something that you hadn't smelled since your childhood. And I remember my house was under construction when I was a little kid, and just recently we did some construction here, and all of a sudden a particular chemical, came back, and it was this flashback to childhood. So my little kids, maybe they're having the same experience. But yeah, I can actually tell you if you don't mind, the childhood experience that made me want to be a painter, because I grew up in the Central Hills of California, very small town. In fact, we lived out in the country. We lived a small town called Kalinga, 7,000 people, and we lived a mile out of town, so we had room to run, kind of, as kids, wild and free, as I wish most kids had the opportunity to do. We had a family friend, and he was over for dinner, and he told this story about how he moved to our town. He said, I got a job offer here, and I drove out in the springtime. And as he drove through the Central California hills, it was like March or April, the hills were covered with wildflowers, tall green grasses, gorgeous. And he said, I can do this. I didn't think of myself as a small town guy, but I can do this. It's beautiful. And so he accepted the job. He came back in maybe June, moved his whole family, came out for the job. And he said everything had dried out. Everything had turned completely dry and yellow. And he said, I wanted to turn around and go back home. It was so depressing. He didn't realize, that he wasn't going to get that look all year long, because the California heat kicks in and it all changes. I remember as a little kid when he told that story, I remember being up in arms, like, no, those yellow grasses, they're beautiful. That's there, because when I would go outside, especially in the evening, this thing would happen every night where the sun would set. And so you'd get those last red rays of sunshine. And the lights would turn red, but the blue sky shining down on the yellow grasses would create this sparkling green. And so you had the red light, the green shadows, and it turned into, the complementary color, electrified magic. It just turned magical. And I swore that someday I would learn how to paint that. I'd figure out how to make color sparkle like that. And I've gone back many times with my sketchbook to paint, paint that sunset and to kind of catch it as best I could. But that magic has always been at the core of me wanting to be a painter.
So this was kind of the experience where helped you to choose your specification, or like you wanted to capture the color and light, so you didn't really thought about like, hey, I want to be character designer, I want to be this or that. So it was the color and light.
It was the color and light. I never wanted to be a character designer, which eventually got me in trouble because I didn't realize how important character design was, early on in my career. But that was, no, I've always been... I've always been about places, color, light. That's always been at the forefront of what's interested me.
And so which were kind of the biggest turning points you kind of went through in order to get where you are now?
The biggest turning point, of course, was an amazing opportunity. I got to work, Dreamwork started up in the mid-90s, 1995. Dreamwork started up and they were looking for people. So it was a great time because there hadn't been a lot happening in animation, but then Disney had hit big in the 90s with some of their big hits, The Lion King. And so other studios took notice and recognized that there was a huge opportunity there. And so they were looking for people, and I had an opportunity to show my portfolio. And I got in the door. I'd been working so hard as a painter, and they were looking. Prince of Egypt was our first show. In fact, I like to keep my poster right here proudly, because what an amazing time. And the thing that was particularly amazing about it is that Steven Spielberg, one of the founders of DreamWorks, he had amblimation happening in Europe. In London, they had hired some of the best artists from all over Europe, had them come to London to work on projects and movies. And with the start of DreamWorks, they closed that down. But they invited all of those artists, invited them to come out to Los Angeles, kind of smooth the way for them to come here and work. And we had some of the best artists from America, from Disney, from the Los Angeles area where so much animation has happened, and the best artists from all over Europe. It was this melting pot that was absolutely incredible. So that opportunity absolutely made me, because I was the new guy, and I got to learn from these people. I will throw in though, here's how much of a melting pot it was. This was kind of a laugh out loud and cringe at the same time kind of a moment, because one of the French artists was talking to one of the people at DreamWorks. I'm not sure what the reasons were, but there's a production designer. He'd worked on a lot of movies. He'd been the production designer of some of the Star Trek movies, a famous production designer from live action. And this man was now in his 80s. I think he was like 85 years old. And he had an honorary office at DreamWorks. He wasn't working on the animated movies, but he had an honorary emeritus office. And so this old school guy bumped into one of the French artists on campus, and the old guy said, "Oh, I recognize by your accent that you're from France. Where in France are you from?" And the French artist said, "Oh, yeah, I'm from Brittany." And the old timer said, "Oh, Brittany, I bombed your town during the war." I'm like, oh my gosh.
Great.
Well, great. Yeah, wow. What do you say to that? Now, to his credit, he was not bombing civilians. Apparently there was a U-boat installation, a German U-boat installation back in World War II, and that was his target, not the town. But oh my gosh, that was one of the little moments that you kind of remember.
And can you maybe mention some of your biggest influences, like a mentor, because you work with some of the great people when you started out, right?
Oh my gosh, they were all great, and I hate to mention any one person because there were so many, and like I say, I had never worked in animation before. This was my first project, and so I was the new guy, and so everyone with experience was a mentor to me. But on the Prince of Egypt, our look supervisor and the supervisor of our department were two artists, Paul Hussein and Ron Lucas. And Paul was the painter and the stylist, the scene look artist, and Ron Lucas was the color stylist. And they were extraordinary, and they were absolutely mentors to us. And I had the chance to work with them on many projects over the years, and that was an amazing mentorship.
And do you remember like a best advice you ever received during this time when you were learning?
Yeah. Best advice. I can tell you the best and the worst advice that I've gotten actually came before I started at Dreamworks. And I didn't understand this advice even until after, like, The Prince of Egypt, because when I was in art school, I loved technical ability. I understood, you know that emotion really carries the day. You understand, but I thought that if I was a great painter, if I got the color and light magical, and if I had good draftsmanship and really made things, sparkle and luminous, I thought that was all that I needed. I thought that was my ticket. But some of my teachers, and there was no entertainment design program, no animation program back at that time. I went to the Art Center College of Design, good school, very good school in Los Angeles. But my better teachers would tell me, well, maybe you should paint a story moment or some characters in here interacting in a way that elicits a story, kind of emotion. And I remember even in one particular painting thinking, well, that would mess up. I got this perfect watercolor, wash that kind of sprinkled and kind of had this sedimentation with the interesting texture in it. And I remember thinking, if I paint characters in there, it'll mess that up. Why would I do that? What an idiot I was. It took until I became a visual development artist to really understand the importance of connecting with the audience through story, because initially I was a painter. I was painting the scenes that appear in the movie. I was not doing the characters. And so what started to happen to me after DreamWorks transitioned from the traditionally animated movies to the CG movies, I transitioned to a visual development position, which was great because I got to have more of an influence on the look of picture. And so we would work, we would paint, we would create concept artwork to visualize the story. Typically, I would work on places. Character designers would work on characters. And what would happen is we'd work up to a big meeting, a green light meeting. Green light meetings were a huge deal because you go in there and it's the top brass, the head of the studio, and you present your work to them. And it's almost like, the emperor, you present your work and then they put their thumb out. And if it's thumbs up, you've got a movie, okay? We're going to put $150 million behind this movie and you get to keep your jobs and it's going to be amazing. If it's the thumbs down, I'm sorry, we don't feel like we have a movie. Thank you very much. We'll find places for some of you. Other ones, thank you for your service. Good luck elsewhere. That's what was at stake. So much so that we would do a rehearsal before. We would get everything done, get everything printed up on the walls, the projected presentation ready. We would do a dress rehearsal the night before to make sure our presentation was perfect. So we'd go through and present the artwork, and I would show some things that I was very proud of. I'd show my epic landscapes that had the light, they'd have the God rays coming down and the light and the warms and the cools. And I had these delusions of grandeur that they would say something like, "Oh, wow, Nathan." Yeah, exactly. I'd put my work up and they would say, "Nathan, we didn't know we had a movie until you showed us this place beyond our imagination. Now we know we have a movie. Thumbs up, green light. It's going to be beautiful. You're beautiful. Take the rest of the day off." That would be my delusion. What would really happen is they would say, "Oh, wow, huh? Yeah, I like it. I mean, maybe it should be a little bit warmer. Maybe there should be some more warmth in it. Make it 20% warmer, and then I think we have a direction that we can go in. Okay, next. Well, that's good enough. If they feel like you have a direction that you can keep going in, that's a good sign. Not what I hoped for, but then the character designers would come up. And they might even show a 20-minute sketch of a couple of characters interacting together in a funny way. And the people, the people reviewing our work, as soon as that came up, they would laugh, they would clap, they would cheer, they would say, we didn't know we had a movie until you showed us these characters. This is fantastic. We believe we have a movie now. We can build a franchise around these amazing characters that you've designed. I know you've been working hard on these 20-minute drawings. You're beautiful. Take the rest of the day off. That's what would really happen. It almost felt like, hey, Nathan, you're not doing anything. Go over there and get these beautiful character designers. Go get them a cup of coffee. That's what it felt like. And so I started to understand that until you communicate with your audience on that character level, until you do that, you don't have the story. You haven't connected with them emotionally. But what that turned to was the real turning point in my career, because I learned and recognized I always make sure I paint characters into my scenes to add that additional story. When they were saying make it warmer, they didn't really mean make it warmer. They meant something emotional was missing. And so I learned that often that was character. But not only that, I came to understand and recognize a tree can have a sense of character. You can pose a tree to make it happy, sad. A rock, a shape. Inanimate objects can be designed so they have a sense of character and they can carry whatever emotion is needed for that scene. And that's when my work actually became usable. That's when that's kind of the moment I became a real artist, that emotional connection with the audience.
Yeah. And do you have like a priority when you are creating your art pieces? Like, is it the emotion, story, composition, color, or everything just needs to work at the same level?
That's absolutely it. The first thing, you read the script, you identify what the scene is. What's the emotion? Is it an up moment, down? Any and every emotion that is present in a story, and a good story will have a full range of emotion. You have to have ideas on how to hit that emotion. The color design, the lighting design, the shape language, the character pose. Every one of those things has to work together in concert to carry whatever emotion is needed for that moment. Yeah. And that's what a visual development artist has to have the ability to do.
Yeah, and then you also work with the color scripts and the whole kind of balancing out of the calm moments and action moments and these kind of story points, right?
That's the best part of my job. I get to do color script work. I get to do contribute to the color script on most projects, and on some projects I get to do the color script in its entirety. And that's very difficult, but it's my favorite thing. It's the thing I take pride in because it requires that range, and that's always my target.
Yeah, and so maybe what was the time when you decided, okay, I want to have a change from the big studio life, and maybe what was going on in your head when you were in this transition?
That they came about for a very specific reason. I had twins. My wife and I, we had twins, and I'd been at Dreamworks for 15 years, and it was just a fantastic 15 years. And when I go on and on about how fantastic it was, it was, but every job is difficult. There are ups and the downs. There were the layoffs, and there were some shows that didn't do nearly as well as we hoped they would. There were some shows that were just bone-crushingly painful, stopping and starting, and How to Train Your Dragon was one that was just bone-crushingly difficult. We went through 3 different sets of directors on that show, on How to Train Your Dragon, and morale was extremely low at a certain point. But Chris Sanders came in and kind of turned the show around, and it was one of our big, great hits. And so going through those highs and lows and pulling out of them was one of the things that made it such a great thing. But like I say, we had twins. There's lots of twins in the world. I didn't realize how very difficult, for my wife, for someone to actually bear twins. She was at home going through a recovery. She needed my help. I got a call from Blue Sky Studios. They were doing Rio 2. They needed someone. I really liked organic stuff in painting. And they needed someone who could go in and do concept and visualize some of the new environments for that show. And they were willing, they're on the East Coast of America, I'm on the West Coast. They were willing to let me work from my home studio. And I thought about that, and I thought, I could work from home, I could be there. I'm needed at home, and so I made that break. I thought that after a while that I would go back in-house, but being at home and working in my home studio has been so great that I've decided I'm never going back. I'm never going back in-house full time. Just to be able to take a nap or go play with the kids, take a break, and no one can tell you otherwise. It's still hard. It's still very long hours, but I can do that anytime, and no one's going to tell me I can't. So that's the thing that made that break, and that's why I want to keep that dream alive.
And so how did it start for you to do the courses online? Was it like a smooth transition or you decided one day like, okay, I want to do this?
It was a smooth transition. I've with my traditional artwork and my background, because nothing was digital. I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s, nothing digital. Yeah. And so my training was in that direction. And of course, you have to get into the digital environment as a concept artist. And so I did that. But I always try and keep the traditional artwork going. Love landscape painting, and I love sketching people, portrait drawing, costume painting, that sort of thing was always exciting for me. And so I've always kept that going on the side. Mm-hmm. I started teaching. I've been a fanatic about life drawing, sketching people and places from life. So I started teaching a class. In fact, if you don't mind, here's how that started. This is going to be the long answer to how did you start teaching online, but maybe I can mention something that's been helpful for me, and maybe two people out there will appreciate it. After we did the movie Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron at Dreamworks, I knew I loved portrait drawing and portrait painting. I'd look at these professional portrait paintings, and I'd been working hard at that on the side, but I knew it would never get there unless I gave it a deeper focus. Mm-hmm. I went to Dreamworks and I asked them for a 6-month sabbatical. What my idea was is I can skip the next movie, Dreamworks' next movie, and pick up something after that. Yeah. Well, they agreed. Things were a little bit slow after that movie ended, and they're kind of slowly ramping up to the next thing. It was kind of like, oh, we don't have to pay you while things are slow, and you'll be available, when things get busy a little bit down the road. Okay, we can agree to that. So I had a contract to come back. I had this 6-month period where I knew I had a job waiting for me at the end. I went to a local art school, and I went to the director of the art school and said, hey, my name's Nathan, and I work at Dreamworks, and would you be interested in me teaching a class on our visual development artwork for Dreamworks? I could teach what I do and what we do. That might be interesting for your students. And in exchange, I can sit in on your life drawing sessions, your classes, the uninstructed. And he was excited about that. The name Dreamworks carries some weight, and he thought that would be helpful. It was a small atelier here in Los Angeles. And so I did that. Every day, 5 days a week, I showed up at 15 till 9, mm-hmm. and I was a fanatic about this. In hindsight, I envy the focus that I had back then. I'd show up every day before 9 o'clock, and I stayed every day until 10 p.m. Took a lunch break, Classes ended at 4, but then we did another session from 7 to 10 p.m. And so I'd actually go off around the neighborhoods and go sketching in my painting sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go out, we'd students and teachers, we'd go out and have dinner, we'd go out sketching. I'd come back till 10 p.m. I did that 5 days a week. I'd go out painting every Saturday. And then, of course, you need a break. I take Sundays off. Mm-hmm. I did that rock solid for 6 months. And that helped me get over that hump, kind of get to the next level in my portrait drawing and painting. It also was the beginning of my teaching career. I really enjoy teaching. And so since that time, I think that was 1999, since that time, I've always had maybe one class. I'm always teaching one class, an evening class, a weekend class. And after I had kids, it was harder to get away. Bobby Chu, one of your favorite artists and one of my favorite artists, we had a chance to mention Bobby and the Schoolism online courses you and I've before we started the video here. Bobby approached me about teaching online, and I jumped at that. What Bobby was doing with Schoolism was amazing. The idea of teaching online, being able to do it on my own schedule was amazing. And it was time for me to switch away from teaching life drawing to teaching concept artwork. Yeah. And so ever since, the things I love the most, color and light design, environment design, picture composition. I've had a chance to work with students all over the world in doing that. And, the chance to be able to talk to you in Switzerland and have students in just about every country in the world has been utterly magical.
Yeah, so how do you combine now your income streams? Is it mainly from teaching online, or do you do also different things on the side, like teaching live or like book selling, art prints, and maybe you can share some of this?
Yeah, I try and do all of those things. You kind of need to really be out there. It's kind of the idea where you do one thing which hopefully draws people in, mm-hmm. and then they'll jump from that one thing to the second thing that you do, maybe your book, and then there's a third thing that you do, and some people will jump to that. And so each one of those things, and I think it really does take three different things that we do as artists. Each one of those things, if we do it well, it attracts people, and if we do a good job of it, then they'll be interested. Oh, what else does this mm-hmm. artist do? What else do they offer? And they'll jump to the next thing, and there's a little bit of a circle there. So obviously, I'm still full-time in animation, animation art, still loving working on animated movies. I've even had the chance to do a little bit with video game design, do some concept art for video games and such. But I teach the online classes. I always have a class going each term. And I've also put a book together of my portrait drawings, and it's how to draw portraits in charcoal. And I have that out there as well. So I'm kind of juggling these different balls, and hopefully there's something in there that is helpful for somebody. So those other things, of course, they're very minor income streams, but it helps. And after each project, maybe I can take a few weeks off, and I'm working on a new book on landscape painting, which I'm very excited about. It's slow going. It's just a little here, a little bit there. It's not going to be out for probably a year and a half, but I hope there'll be something in there that will be interesting, exciting, helpful for somebody.
And it will be traditional paintings or kind of combination of digital and traditional?
Traditional, yeah. The thing for me is going out and sketching in watercolor, gouache, and just doing 1-hour sketches, because the light changes. In the sunshine, you have about an hour, and then the light changes enough where you're not doing the same painting anymore. And so my idea has always been, how can you catch what you're seeing in 1 hour? Because you see a billion details. You literally see millions of details. So what do you do? How do you edit that down, distill it down into a 1-hour painting? It's a huge challenge. It's hard. It will always be hard. But that's what my book will be about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like grouping the values and just simplifying an observation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, perfect. And the classes you teach online, do you have a favorite one? It's like asking which baby is your favorite, but do you have like the one which is close to your heart?
Oh, I don't. I kind of consider, I picked my three topics because I consider them to be the big three. Of course, everyone knows you need the foundational skills: perspective, drawing, draftsmanship, the foundational skills. After that, if you're going to be a concept artist, if you're going to visualize from imagination what something might look like, take your audience to places that they can't go to in real life. And by the way, I kind of consider that to be the thing that potentially can make us special as an artist. If you create a place and a story that people cannot experience in real life, they have to come to you to get that makes you important as an artist. It gives you opportunities. I think that's our passport to a career in art and storytelling. And so after the foundation, like I mentioned, we have to be experts in how color works, how lighting works. If you're going to create places, you have to have a grasp of environment design, how to, as we were mentioning earlier, how do you elicit emotion from inanimate objects in an environment? Have to be an expert on that. We have to be expert picture makers, composition. If we're going to present our work in the form of pictures, we have to have a mastery of how to make compelling pictures. So that's the big three: color and light design, environment design, pictorial composition are my three classes. But I've also been teaching, and maybe this will be the answer to your question, I am teaching a landscape sketching course online. So I have my lessons, and then I send them off wherever they live. They go out into the landscape, do their paintings, and then they scan them in, send them back to me, and I do critiques, online critiques with them. I do screen capture where I paint over their work and make suggestions. And so I actually have, from halfway around the world at Schoolism, I also have a landscape sketching class going. And that one's fairly new, just in the last year. So maybe that's the one that I'm having the best time with right now.
Oh, perfect. And then people can see you also on the live events, right? When you travel around the world. Yeah,
that's the other thing that's amazing, because I have to give credit to luck. I mean, obviously we have to get our skill set up so that we're useful for people. But this is probably the best time in history to be an artist. Every city in the world has small animation and video game studios cropping up and getting into that game, and good for them, because there's these amazing games and animated projects that are coming from all over the world. But a lot of these places, they don't necessarily have local experience. Animation, game design is new in these places. And so they reach out to people and groups who have had that experience. And so I get these invitations to travel, maybe come and do a workshop. We do this Schoolism, we do live events for those, specifically those kind of people in studios. And so it's been the opportunity to travel to some of these places that I would never have a chance to go to, people that I wouldn't have a chance to meet, and go and do a little sightseeing, do a few sketches. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that also has been a high point.
Yeah, it's definitely really nice for people to meet their heroes and see how it works, and maybe go for workshops and talks in real life, because you just have a different connection.
Well, my wife made a point recently that I really appreciated it. The way she phrased it was interesting. She said, because I've been teaching on Schoolism for quite a while now, and we really have, we have students from every city in the world, joining us for Schoolism. And for the last 3-4 years, we've been traveling to a lot of cities, maybe 4 or 5 times a year I'll go and do this. And so my wife said, what's interesting about that is that you could be anywhere in the world and get thrown into jail. And if you ended up in jail, wherever you were, there's someone you could probably call. Anywhere in the world, there's probably someone you've met as a student, or you've been in that country, that city. You could, if you had, call someone and say, hey, remember you took that class from me? Well, here I am in a Turkish jail, and I remember you live here in you live here in Turkey. Do you know anyone? Could you give me a hand? Could you put me in touch? But it's kind of, that's the great thing. These people, they're unique, they're special. I wouldn't have ever met them it's great. It's fantastic. Great
Oh,
time to be an
perfect.
artist.
Yeah, so definitely good to take your class. I will put the link down below so everyone can check it out because it was really nice. I really enjoyed your classes. And yeah, let's go maybe back to your art career and think about like maybe is there something you wish you knew before you started the whole art career, something like advice to young self?
Um, yeah, I'll mention because you were asking about advice, and I can also mention because I've had excellent advice, and I can mention bad advice as well. But I would fall back, the positive thing. I would fall back on that idea of emotion. I thought, as I mentioned, technical ability would get me there, and it's only a little piece of it. In fact, you and I met at CTN, a CTN Animation Expo,
Yeah.
and Pete Docter gave an amazing speech about communicating with the audience, and that was the realization. Whatever that we're good at and whatever we're not yet good at, the moment that we learn to reach out and emotionally connect with the audience, that's the moment that you're a real artist. No matter what you're good at, no matter what you're still not good at, that's it. And so that's the very best advice that took way too long to sink in. The bad advice, of course, and I think this is improving. But there's always the bad advice that, hey, absolutely, be an artist, sure, in your free time, but don't quit your day job. And we know that's bad advice because this is an all or none thing. But I remember, and I got that exact same advice from some of the people that I love most dearly in life. And that's their job. There are people whose job it is to kind of remind us to be reasonable, to be sensible. But there's something that gradually dawned on me, because we think of that as, no, that's terrible advice. If you're going to be an artist, it's all or none. There was an artist, not an artist actually, there was a guy at Dreamworks when we started on The Prince of Egypt. He was a production assistant. And so his job was to support the artists. And he would literally, part of his job, he would push a supply cart around, making sure we had the paints, the brushes that we needed. And he'd come around and see if we needed anything. And he mentioned one day we were just talking, and he mentioned to me, he said, I actually really wanted to be an artist. I wanted to go to art school. And, I was told, no, you be sensible. You got to go to business school, and you gotta do that. And he said, and I let myself be talked into that. I went to business school, and he said, here I find myself at Dreamworks working for artists who are earning something like triple the salary that I'm earning. And I'm the one who went to business school. And he was kind of upset and bitter about that. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, how sad, how sad that he got pulled from the thing that he wanted to do and pushed in a different direction and found himself with this deep regret in life. But I have since changed my mind about that point of view. That was absolutely the right advice for him, because if he didn't have the fire to say, no, I am not going to business school, and there is nothing you can tell me otherwise. I am an artist, I'm going to be an artist, and I will burn my candle at both ends until the sun goes out to be an artist, and no one can tell me otherwise. Someone did tell him otherwise, and he didn't do it. He made the right decision, because in this business, it can burn you. It can burn you hard. I've been going on and on about it's magical, it's wonderful. It is, and it's also crushing. And you have to care about it so deeply that you can see past that and work past it. And so it's actually very important for people to tell us, don't do it. Because if we end up agreeing with them, we know that we weren't meant to be an artist.
Yeah, so you have to be really passionate about it and just going through everything just to do it every day.
Otherwise, it will never happen.
And have you ever felt lost if you kind of made the right decision to go on this career path? Did you ever like had this kind of thoughts like, okay, maybe it wasn't for me, or you always knew like this is it?
It's never happened. It's never. It's just. It's the thing that I've never questioned. It's always been the right road. Doesn't mean I've done the best job at it, but it's always been the decision. It's always been the right decision to try to do this as best I can figure out.
Yeah. But as you mentioned as well, going to business school, it's quite important as well to know how to market yourself and be kind of on the business side of the art career as well. Did you have some help from someone to advise like, okay, how should I do the networking and kind of promote myself and just maybe to do kind of your own thing?
Yeah, that's another thing where I've done that kicking and screaming because I don't want anything to distract me from my work, and so all of the social networking, all of those things, they pull you away from it's time away from actually doing the artwork. But I did. We do artwork. We want people to see it. We hope to get noticed. We hope to get approval. As artists, we really want people to look at our work and say, wow, in some way say, wow. And so when blogs first came around, when people first started doing art blogs, I thought that was fantastic and put my blog up. And of course, eventually that transitioned to people didn't no longer want it to go to a blog when they had Facebook, which automatically brought it to their own feed rather than going to some other website. And that kind of bugged me because I hated the format of Facebook. The idea of spending all kinds of time, should I friend these people? Should I not? All of that bugged me. So I held on, I stuck with the blog for too long. I still keep a blog up, but I probably waited a little bit too long to do Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of that, because on the blog you can put your artwork up like a gallery and put the backdrop you want, present it in a way that you feel like puts your artwork in best position, and then Facebook comes along and wants to put your artwork in a certain way and certain ways they deal with their audience, and it's set against a white backdrop and you can't control that, and that's not how your work is meant to be seen. And that stuff bugged me so much that I waited too long to get on there. But we're here to reach an audience, right? We're here to put our artwork out there. And so I came around, and we've mentioned Bobby Chu, one of the great character designers and frankly business people in art. And Bobby kind of helped me about when we started with schoolism. I needed to get the word out. Bobby really helped me out with the best ways to approach social media, kind of expanded. I was on Facebook, I got on Twitter and Instagram and the big platforms. And it's very important. I post something every single day, almost without exception. There's always, we go off to China. So I've been working with some Chinese companies lately, and sometimes the connectivity doesn't allow me to post. But with those exceptions, I post something every day because it's very important, not for one, to have my artwork out there and see what the response is to it, but I need people to be aware that I exist. So when they say, hey, we have this project, who can we call? Those calls will keep coming in. I mentioned I have twins. I also have a daughter. There's going to be college. I got to keep out there. I have to have people remembering that I exist. So I'm glad you mentioned social media, because it's not natural to me, and yet we really need to do it.
Yeah, even though if it's not super enjoyable, maybe like, okay, I have to do it just to be out there and see potential clients at some point in the future.
It's
And
true.
maybe can you mention like what is your best experience with working within the team? Something you learn like you have to have, or maybe what some starting artists should avoid, like if they had never worked within the team as only as a freelance.
Yeah, being a team player, let me mention two things because it's an excellent question. I saw something recently that made me think about animation teams, and it was something completely separate from that. I was watching one of those cooking shows. It's kind of popular. There's these shows where there's cooking competitions. That's kind of a popular kind of TV show. I was watching one of these shows, and there was this guy competing on this show. And I'm not a cook, but we all understand that to be an expert cook, an expert baker, there's the technical expertise. Like there's a deep technical, you have to almost science. And there was this guy on the show that was this technical expert, all of these complicated, things that you have to combine and time and bake and put together, just very difficult to do. And everyone agreed, the judges agreed that he had amazing technical expertise. The other contestants all agreed, yeah, this guy is the best. He's more experienced. He's better. And yet he was the first person who got kicked off of the competition. And here's why. They had to do three things. They, yes, had to have a technical expertise in their baking. But number two, part of the competition was teamwork. You were part of a team. If you're a baker, a cook, you're part of a kitchen, and that is a team. Always, your whole career in that business would be that way. He couldn't get along with anybody. No one was good enough. No one could do anything right. He was on everybody's back. Whether he was meant to be the boss or not, he acted like the boss. Everybody hated this guy. And so he utterly failed in that. And then they had clients come in. And so a client would come in and make a request, and then they had to create the clients, a cake or some sort of a big event that he and the team he was thrown together with, they were meant to cater. And so clients would come in and say what the event was about and what they wanted. And instead of following the client's wishes, he would simply fall back on what he was best at. He would do what he was good at, regardless of what the client wanted. So he was hitting 1 out of 3 requirements. That's a failure. And he immediately got kicked off the show. And I thought about art. And I thought about a few artists that I've worked with who were that guy. Mm-hmm. They were amazing artists. They couldn't get along with people. They wanted to do what they wanted to do. And they're amazing on their own, doing their own work, creating their graphic novel, doing their personal illustration, and some of them very successful. It's not even a criticism. Mm-hmm. It's just that that personality belongs in a certain genre, doing a certain kind of a thing. For the rest of us, it's teamwork, because it's kind of teamwork that pulled us out of the dark ages, the primordial. You're living 100,000 years ago, and you come up with a saber-toothed tiger, and you're dead. You're dead in 3 seconds. You are. But if you're in a group, 7 people, and you 7 people are experts, and you're experts at surviving. The tables are completely turned. The 7 of you come across that saber-toothed tiger. It never had a chance. It is down in 3 seconds. It's over. That's how we originally survived. It's how people put a man on the moon. It's how people make an animated movie, an amazing video game. It's teamwork. In this business, the ability to do that is everything.
And what about your teamworks in the future? Do you have already like a dream scenario in 5 to 10 years? What would you like to be doing?
That's the great thing about this. This is it for me. I mentioned, don't have much free time, but I find a little to work on, a book project. I find a little time to teach an online class on a subject I care about. I'm working on a few animated projects that are imaginative. And so 5 years, 10 years, I hope I have the opportunity to keep doing exactly the same thing.
Oh, perfect. And what about like an epic question in 100 years? What would you like to be remembered for?
Yeah, I have a very specific answer to that because I had the experience before the internet here, moving to LA and going to art school. We would haunt used bookstores. We'd go to used bookstores all over town, and you go to the art department, and there's a bunch of badly printed art history books that you have to ignore because they were printed in the 60s and they look terrible. But there always seemed to be a book somewhere in there, some obscure book of an artist that you never heard of. Maybe it was an illustrator kind of in the 70s and 80s that were doing some unique, I don't know, album cover artwork or doing some kind of a strange fantasy illustration. And you'd never heard of this person, but you stumble across this little limited press book that they had put out, and you thumb through it and you think, why have I never heard of this person? This is, it's kind of weird. It's kind of different, but it's exciting. It's different. It's really engaging. I should have heard of this person. You take it home, you pour through it, you're inspired by it, and it kind of pushes you to try and do something special yourself. And it will be good enough for me. It will absolutely be enough. 100 years down the road, I don't know, these blogs, these social medias, hopefully they'll be archived somewhere, on the internet. And, because used bookstores, that's not where we look for art anymore. Maybe someone will be going through those old archive blogs and they'll stumble across Nathan Fowkes art and say, oh, never heard of this guy, but this is kind of cool. There's some fun stuff here. Why haven't I heard of this guy? I kind of like some of this stuff. That will be enough for me. If somebody has that experience, I will be satisfied.
That would be perfect. Yeah, it might be digital, bookstore. Like now they made this sketchbook bookstore. So even maybe from your sketchbooks in this digital form, that might be interesting.
I hope so.
And do you have maybe some books which are kind of inspiring for you now you would give as a gift to someone?
Actually, no. Actually not. I've started shying away. There is so much great influence out there. There's so much that sometimes it feels like, we look around and even now, I have the same experience too, but it's especially true for young artists. There's so much out there, and it's a good thing where we look at it and say, oh, I'd love to do something in that direction. I'd love to do something in that direction. And it starts feeling like you're a ship on the ocean with your sails up, but the wind's coming from all the different directions. And so you go nowhere. Mm-hmm. And so it's a little tricky to get your influence all going in one direction. And so I have students ask me, well, what books do you recommend? What artists do you recommend that I look at? And I can absolutely say, well, if you love draftsmanship combined with a beautiful lost and found kind of a quality where the artwork is really about something and other stuff is really edited out. Richard Schmid is one of the great painters. That's Schmid, one of the great oil painters who has and I can point them in directions to people who do different things. But to say, look at this artist, you should be inspired by that person, I don't like to do that so much anymore because my personality is not their personality. Yeah. And so they're going to look around and different artwork is going to grab their attention than what I might recommend. And it's so accessible that I almost don't need to do that. The young guys and girls, coming up, they're more plugged in to media. They're more plugged into what's going on, more plugged into the internet than I am. Mm-hmm. And business people have been talking about reverse mentoring, turning to young people, who are really on top of that. As the rest of us start getting a little bit older, we actually have to be inspired by the young people because they're so plugged in. Mm-hmm. And so I actually sometimes ask them for their advice. And the thing I actually ask, I don't suggest art books so much anymore. I actually always ask people what their favorite science fiction novel is. Some people don't love science fiction the way that I do, but that's kind of my favorite genre of reading for pleasure. Reading books that combine science and imagination and wonder what might be somewhere out there someday. And so that's the question I always ask them. Let's just set art aside and talk about imagination. Do you read fantasy or science fiction? Give me a recommendation, because I'm always looking for something to spark the imagination.
Oh, perfect. So now people can send you emails with recommendations
I'm
for
always,
books.
I have a challenge though. The challenge is send me a great science fiction novel that I haven't read yet, because like I say, there's very little free time. But that's one of the few pleasures. A lot of them are audiobooks, because you can do chores and things that need to be done while you're listening to audiobooks. But yeah, I hope they can find a good one that I haven't read yet, because once you set art aside and just something that people do for pure pleasure, that one's mine.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, challenge accepted. I will send you something as well.
Yes, good.
Perfect.
Okay, I'll look forward to it.
And before we say goodbye, maybe you can share last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we will finish.
Yeah, let me think about that for a second, because here's what I'll say. And I'm pausing because I'm afraid this is a bit of a long-winded answer, and so I'm thinking about how to condense it. We have a podcast here. We want everyone to stick with us. So there's something I've been watching lately that has kind of grabs me a little bit. There's this TV show called The Voice. It's probably most people have seen it or heard of it. And we all love music. I'm not so much into pop music. That's not what I watch it for. I don't have time to watch that show. What I end up doing is watching YouTube clips from the show. And for people who aren't familiar, it's a show where they're looking for pop stars. And so they cannot see the singer. The singer goes to the mic and sings their song, and the judges don't see him. But if the judges like what they hear, they hit this button where they turn around and they can see the singer. But they have to really wait. If they hit the button, that means they're making a commitment to the singer. Potentially, they're agreeing to mentor the singer. So they don't want to turn until they really believe in the singer. Because then they're kind of be stuck. They have to mentor the person and carry them through the show. And so they're listening for something special that they'll really want to invest in. So here's what I love about that show, even though it's not really my genre of music. I admire it, though. Someone comes on and they start really strong. They sing like you immediately know, wow, this person can sing. And so you see the judges, they perk up, they listen. And what they're waiting for, there's this moment where the singer, if they do their job, if the singer really does something special, there's a moment where they do something with their voice that is it's a surprise. It's amazing. It goes up or down or all around. I'm not a singer. I can't tell you technically what that is, but they start off great and strong, but then they do something with their voice that you're hearing someone special. You're hearing someone unique. You're hearing someone who can do something that not very many other people in the world can do. And I love that. I turn it off after I'm satisfied at that moment. I turn it off because it makes me think about what I hope for most and what I think all of us have to strive for. We got to do good artwork. Of course, being good is not enough. There are so many good people out there. You'll get lost in a sea of good artists, especially with the power of digital artwork, and so much can be done. The moment that we take that good artwork and we put the shapes and the colors and the character design and the landscape and the light and the color and the composition, put it together in such a way as to surprise and excite our audience, just that little extra thing that might be a little bit more unique and a little bit more rare. The moment that we hit that mark, we've stood above that crowd. And that's the moment. That is our passport to the next level where we have opportunities as artists. So we can't strive to be good. We have to strive to do even better than that.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And thank you so much for being here. It was a great advice and great talk.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you so much again for everyone who joined, and hope you get inspired and just continue inspiring each other. So thanks everyone, and thank you Nathan again for being here.
Good luck everybody. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and let me know in comments. Also, please subscribe to my channel for more videos, because I post new interview every single workday. You can also find the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a little freebie waiting for you, so go check it out. If you want to listen to the interviews on the go, make sure to check out the podcast episodes at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and don't forget to inspire each other. I will see you guys in the next episode.